In the upper reaches of the Rhymney Valley, in Coed Dion, there was a sister and a brother. The sister's name was Maidwen, and the brother Ewan, and they lived with their father Sanan, who looked after the trees in the forest, and the trees looked after him. They loved living in the forest. They climbed the trees. They made friends with all the animals. The fawns would come and eat out of their hands. They would feed the rabbits. They'd nibble off their fingers. And on this particular day, they'd gone down to the river to feed the swans. And while they were feeding the swans,
with leftover vegetable scraps, an old woman appeared on the banks of the river. Her hair was long and white, and her back slightly stooped with age. They knew her, had seen her before, and knew that their dad was always kind and respectful to her, and had taught them to do the same.
"Good evening," said the old lady. "Good evening," answered the children. She stopped to talk to them. "I've made some cakes. Would you like some?" "Yes, please," said the children, and they followed the old lady to the little cottage. The cake was good, and the children stayed and chatted for a while. Then they said they'd better be gone. Their dad would be worried. Where they were, the old lady didn't want them to go, so they stayed a bit longer. When it was dark outside and they knew their dad would be missing them, they tried to go again. "We have to go home," they said. But the old lady wouldn't let them go. "Stay here," she said, and locked the door. "Ewan, Midway," they heard their father calling them. They shouted back, "Dad, we're here," but he couldn't hear them.
The old lady picked up a branch from behind the door. She struck the children. Swish, swish, you'd be better off as fish. The magic branch was a magic wand from a hazel tree. The children began to shiver and to shake. They began to quiver and to quake. They were shrinking and turning to silver, with cold shining scales all over them. They were fish, 2 silver, black-spotted salmon fish. The old lady picked them up, put them in her basket, and hurried out of the door. The old lady went as fast as she could down to the river Rhymney. She passed Sanan on the way down there. "Have you seen the children? Have you seen my Midwin and Ewan?" he asked her. "No, she said. "I haven't seen any children." In the basket, the children called out, "Dad, we're here," but he couldn't hear them.
They were salmon now. They were the salmon children, and they flipped and flapped in the old lady's basket. When she got to the river, she threw them in. "Splash, splish, you'll be better off as fish," she cried. Splash, splish, and they were in the water.
They turned as they tumbled with the river as it made its way down the valley, down to the sea. They found they could talk to other with their minds. They were the salmon children. They tumbled and turned as the river threaded through the coated dune. They leapt high and dived deep as the river came out of the forest and flowed past fields and farms. Down the river Rhymney ran, all the way down to the Severn Sea. Down the river Rhymney ran, and down the salmon children ran with it, all the way down to the Moor Hatwen. Mudron and Ewan swam in Moor Hatwen, the Severn Sea.
When the winter winds roughened the waves, they dived deeper and deeper to the land beneath. Deep down at the very bottom of the sea, the salmon children found another country. They found the country of the Mer. They lived with the Mer people all through the winter. They learned all their stories and songs. They were the salmon children. They swam with dolphins and played hide and seek with the shy seahorses. All through the winter they lived in the land at the bottom of the sea. They did not suffer through the winter storms. They were safe from the rain and snow. But all that time they never forgot their home in the forest, and they never ever stopped missing their dad.
One morning at the end of winter they swam up to the surface of the sea. They could smell spring. They could smell home. "Let's go home. Let's go home and find Dad," they said. Splish, splash, the salmon children leapt and dived up the waters of the river Rhymney. They leapt high and dived deep as the river flowed up the valley past fields and farms.
And they came to Coed Dion, the black wood. And they swam on among the trees until they got caught in a net. And in that net they stayed the whole night long. They couldn't escape. And in the morning, the little people who had set the net, they came and they found the salmon children trapped in the net. And they looked at those salmon children and they knew that they weren't ordinary children. They weren't ordinary fish. They were magic fish. So they released them from the net and they put them into a basket and they walked up to Pooley Bell, where Briachlin lived, the Primrose Queen. She held her court behind the waterfall at Pooley Bell. And she came out from behind the waterfall and she saw the salmon children in the basket. And she fetched out a crystal vase. And into that she put water and she placed the fish. And as she did that, she sang a song. She sang a primrose song. She sang a primrose song that created a primrose path that passed from Pooley Bell through Coed Dion, along the banks of the Rumney and back into Coed Dion until it reached Sannon's cottage. And Sannon had never stopped grieving for the loss of his children. But now he suddenly had a sense in his house that he should open the door. And he went over to the door, he opened the door, and there, spread out before him, was the primrose path. And he could hear Briachlin singing as he began to walk down the path. And he followed the primroses until they brought him all the way to Pooley Bell. And there, outside on the land beside the waterfall, stood Briachlin with her green snake at her side, all dressed in green. And she looked at Sannon, and she stepped to one side so that Sannon could see the salmon children in the crystal vase. And they looked at their father and they said, "Da! Da! It's us! It's your children!" But they were salmon children and they couldn't hear him. But they did the only thing that salmon children can do. They gathered together all their strength and they leapt out of the vase and they pirouetted in the sky and they tumbled and somersaulted, and as they came down, Briachlin, she touched each of them with her hazel wand, and as they fell, the scales fell from them, and when they landed, they were children once again. And now the family was reunited and there were tears and laughter and much hugging. And then the children went to Briachlin and said, "But what about the old woman? What will happen to her?" And she said, "Don't worry about the old woman. I'll take care of her." So the family was able to return to the cottage in Coed Dion. And Briachlin, she walked down the River Rumney until she came to where the old woman was. And the old woman was bent, her hair was white, her face was wrinkled and contorted with the sadness that she'd felt for what she had done to those two children. And when Briachlin saw her, she realised that she'd suffered enough. So she pointed her hazel wand, and the old woman's back stiffened, and her feet gripped the ground and sank into it, and her arms stretched out like the branches of a tree, and before Briachlin's eyes she became a weeping willow tree. And the tears that flowed from her eyes now fell as leaves from the tips of her branches. And that's my story.